The day a man stops chasing is not always the day he stops loving. Sometimes it is the day he finally understands that love has been turned into a door he is no longer allowed to open. Nathan Brooks had been sitting in the living room of their small house in Madison, Wisconsin, since 9:30 that night, waiting beside 2 mugs of tea that had gone cold nearly an hour earlier. Outside, late autumn wind pressed dry leaves against the front steps, and the porch light flickered every few minutes like it was tired of staying awake too. Nathan had not planned a fight. He had not written a speech. He had only hoped that when Emily came home, they could sit down like husband and wife and talk about the space that had grown between them until it felt like a third person living in the house. The lamp beside the sofa cast a warm circle over the coffee table, where her favorite chamomile tea sat untouched. He had made it because she used to say it helped her calm down after long days. That was the kind of thing Nathan remembered. Small things. Unimportant things to other people. The way Emily hated ice and water after 8 at night. The way she rubbed her left temple when a meeting went badly. The way she used to text him when she was leaving work, not because he demanded it, but because she knew he liked knowing she was safe. At 10:58, the garage door finally rumbled open. Nathan looked toward the hallway, not angry, just tired. Emily came in with her laptop bag over one shoulder, her phone in one hand, and the bright, detached energy she carried home from the marketing firm now, as if the house were not where she lived, but where she stopped between more important places. She saw him sitting there and sighed before he said a word. That sigh told him how the conversation would go, but he tried anyway. "Emily," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and looked at the 2 mugs on the table. "Not tonight. It keeps being not tonight." She removed her heels slowly, one hand against the wall, her expression sharpening. "I had a 12-hour day, Nathan. I am not doing one of your emotional check-ins right now." The phrase landed with a familiar sting. Emotional check-ins. That was what she had started calling the conversations he once thought were part of marriage. He kept his voice even. "I'm not trying to corner you. I am trying to understand when we became 2 people passing each other in the same house." Emily let out a short laugh, not amused, just impatient. "This is exactly what I mean. You make everything heavy." Nathan looked at the tea, the thin film forming on the surface, and felt something inside him bend but not break. "I asked for 1 dinner. 1 walk. 1 hour without your phone. That is not heavy." She turned toward him then, fully, and the coldness in her face made the room feel smaller. "From now on, I will decide when we talk or spend time together. Stop chasing me." The words did not come out as a slip. They came out clean, deliberate, practiced somewhere before this moment. Nathan stared at her for a long time. He heard the furnace click on. He heard a car pass outside on the wet street. He heard the small, ordinary sounds of a home that had just been told one person no longer had equal access to the marriage inside it. "Stop chasing me." As if he were not her husband. As if trying to reach her across the distance she created was some embarrassing habit he needed to outgrow. As if love had become a waiting room, and Emily had decided she was the only one holding the appointment book. A younger version of Nathan might have argued. He might have said he was not chasing. He was trying. He might have reminded her of the nights he stayed up with her when she lost her job, the bills he covered, the interviews he helped her prepare for, the way he had never once made her feel like a burden when she needed more from him than she could give back. But standing there in the quiet living room, with 2 cold mugs between them, he understood that explaining himself to someone determined to call devotion pressure would only make him smaller. Emily folded her arms, waiting for him to plead, to defend, to prove again that he would always step toward her first. Nathan looked down at the wedding ring on his hand, then back at the woman he had loved for 7 years. "Okay," he said. Emily blinked, thrown off by the simplicity of it. "Okay." He nodded once. "I will stop." She studied his face, searching for sarcasm, anger, manipulation, anything she could use to keep the moment under her control. She found none. Nathan stood, picked up both cold mugs, and carried them into the kitchen. He poured the tea down the sink without another word. Behind him, Emily remained in the living room, silent now, but not worried yet. She thought she had finally taught him to give her space. She did not understand that some doors, once closed from the inside, do not always open again. 7 years earlier, Emily had loved Nathan Brooks because he was the man who stayed when life became inconvenient. They met during a February snowstorm in Madison, outside a pharmacy where Emily's car refused to start and the wind pushed snow sideways across the parking lot. She had been standing beside the driver's door with a dead phone, a thin coat, and the look of someone trying not to panic in public. Nathan had been coming out with cold medicine for a coworker when he noticed her turning the key again and again, as if determination could warm a dead battery. He did not make a joke. He did not make her feel foolish. He asked if she needed help, drove 2 blocks to buy jumper cables, came back with a cup of gas station coffee, and waited until her engine stayed running. Emily used to tell that story like it was the moment the universe gave her a man who did not leave. Back then, she did not call it chasing. She called it being chosen. Their first years together were built from ordinary acts of devotion. Nathan waited outside a downtown office for 3 hours while Emily sat through the interview that eventually gave her a new career path. He paid the rent alone for 2 months after she lost a job she had hated but still cried over. He helped her sort through credit card debt she was too ashamed to admit, spreading statements across the kitchen table and saying, "We will handle one number at a time," until her breathing slowed. He never made her neediness feel like a flaw. He never called her anxious when she asked for reassurance. He never acted as if her fear of being abandoned was too much work. If anything, he treated love like a promise to keep returning, no matter how many times the same wound asked the same question. Emily used to reach for his hand during those nights and whisper, "You are the only person who keeps choosing me." Nathan built his marriage around that sentence. He believed being steady was not the boring part of love, but the deepest part. Their house in Madison was small, with a narrow driveway, a living room that stayed too cold in January, and an old maple tree in the backyard that dropped more leaves than either of them could rake in one afternoon. Nathan loved that house because Emily once loved it with him. They painted the bedroom a soft blue she picked from a sample card at the hardware store. They bought the sofa on clearance and celebrated with takeout on the floor because delivery felt cheaper than a restaurant and somehow better. Friday nights were soup in winter, grilled cheese when neither of them wanted to cook, and movies they sometimes paused for an hour just to talk. When Emily studied at night to shift into marketing, Nathan handled laundry, dishes, grocery runs, and the small invisible work that keeps a home from turning against the people inside it. He did not do those things to earn praise. He did them because he thought partnership meant carrying more when the other person was climbing. And Emily did climb. First came the junior role, then the bigger campaigns, then the promotion that made her name appear on emails with people who spoke in strategies, brand identity, and executive visibility. Nathan was proud of her. He told everyone. He brought flowers after her first major presentation. He stayed up to help her rehearse talking points he barely understood. But success changed the weather around Emily. The woman who once needed reassurance began treating reassurance as something beneath her. The same questions she had asked for years, "Are we okay? Do you still love me? Are you proud of me?" became questions she found exhausting when Nathan asked anything close to them. She started saying she needed space after work, then more space on weekends, then space inside conversations that used to belong to both of them. Nathan tried to adapt. He stopped asking about late nights. He stopped suggesting plans too far in advance. He learned to read her mood before speaking, which is a quiet way of saying he began living carefully in his own home. But every compromise moved the line farther away. What had once been connection became pressure. What had once been devotion became chasing. And by the night, Emily stood in their living room and told him she would decide when they could talk or spend time together. Nathan finally understood the tragedy of loving someone who had grown used to being chosen. Emily had not forgotten all the times he stayed. She had simply started believing he always would. Emily's promotion did not ruin the marriage by itself. Success is not cruel on its own. What changed was the circle that came with it, the late dinners, the networking events, the coworkers who spoke about freedom as if commitment were an outdated rule people followed only because they were afraid to live. Vanessa Cole was the loudest of them. She worked 2 offices down from Emily at the marketing firm, dressed like every hallway was a runway, and had a way of turning ordinary complaints into declarations of independence. At first, Emily mentioned her casually. Vanessa said the client pitch was weak. Vanessa said the senior team needed more women in the room. Vanessa said Emily should stop apologizing before sharing ideas. Nathan liked those parts. He wanted Emily to have friends who made her brave. But then Vanessa's advice started coming home with sharper edges. Women do too much emotional reporting, Emily said one night while scrolling through her phone at the kitchen counter. Nathan looked up from rinsing a pan. Emotional reporting? Having to explain where we are, what we feel, why we are tired, why we need space. He turned off the faucet. I do not ask for reports. Emily shrugged without looking at him. Maybe not on purpose. That phrase became a door she could close any time he tried to step closer. Not on purpose. It made his care sound accidental in the worst way, as if he could harm her simply by asking where she had been or whether she wanted dinner. The change was gradual, but it had a rhythm. Emily came home later and called it opportunity. She skipped their Friday nights and called it growth. She answered work messages through breakfast and called it ambition. When Nathan asked if they could plan a weekend together, she sighed as though he had requested proof of ownership. I cannot be your entire emotional schedule, she said once, repeating a line that sounded too polished to have been born in their kitchen. Nathan stood with 2 grocery bags in his hands, one of them holding the oat milk she preferred and the oranges she liked sliced cold. He wanted to say that wanting one meal with his wife did not make her his entire schedule. Instead, he put the groceries away and told himself she was under pressure. That was what he had always done. He translated distance into stress, sharpness into exhaustion, silence into a phase they would survive if he stayed patient enough. But Vanessa had given Emily a language that made patience look like weakness. Every boundary Emily set was one-sided. She could disappear into a work dinner without warning, but Nathan asking whether she would be home before midnight became control. She could cancel plans 20 minutes before leaving, but his disappointment became guilt-tripping. She could go quiet for days, but his attempt to talk became chasing. The word started small, then grew teeth. You are chasing the conversation, Emily said one morning when he asked if they could finish an argument from the night before. You are chasing reassurance, she said when he asked if they were okay. You are chasing me, she said after he suggested they take a walk without phones. Each time, Nathan felt himself step back inside his own chest. He began measuring words before speaking, the way a man measures ice before crossing a frozen lake. One Friday evening, he heard Emily laughing in the bedroom with Vanessa on video call. He was in the hallway carrying a clean load of towels, and he stopped when he heard his name. He keeps trying to schedule feelings like dentist appointments, Emily said. Vanessa laughed hard enough that the sound came through the half-closed door. That is what they do when they sense you pulling your energy back. They panic. Emily laughed too. Not awkwardly. Not defensively. Like Nathan's effort to keep their marriage alive had become a funny story to tell someone else. He stood there with the warm towels in his arms and felt something quiet inside him lower itself to the floor. He did not interrupt. He did not push the door open. He walked to the linen closet, folded each towel with careful hands, and placed them on the shelf like ordinary work could hold him together. That night, Emily came downstairs and asked why he was so quiet. Nathan looked at her, trying to decide whether to tell her he had heard everything. But the way she stood there, impatient before he even answered, told him she was not asking because she wanted to know. She was asking because his silence was inconvenient. Just tired, he said. She nodded, relieved not to owe him more. And Nathan realized the loneliness in their marriage was no longer accidental. It had become a system. Emily got to decide when she was available, when he was too much, when his needs were valid, and when his love was just another task she wanted to postpone. He had not become needy. He had become unwelcome in the emotional life of his own wife. Nathan did not confront Emily about the video call right away because some wounds need a night to prove they are not imagination. He gave her the benefit of silence for almost 2 weeks after that, and in those 2 weeks, the small refusals became a language of their own. On Monday, he asked if they could have dinner together before her Thursday client event, and she said she would see how she felt. Thursday came, and she texted at 7:20 that she was grabbing drinks with Vanessa and a few people from work. On Saturday, he suggested walking around the farmer's market the way they used to do when the air was crisp and the maple leaves turned yellow along the sidewalks. Emily replied from upstairs, maybe later, then spent 2 hours on the phone and left for a Pilates class without mentioning it again. On Sunday morning, Nathan made pancakes because she had once said pancakes made a house feel forgiven. Emily came into the kitchen, looked at the table, and said, I already had a protein bar. Each moment was small enough to sound petty if he repeated it out loud, and that was what made it dangerous. A marriage can survive one missed dinner, one ignored text, one tired no. What it cannot survive is the slow education of one person that their hope is embarrassing. Nathan began to feel embarrassed for wanting normal things. A walk, a meal, a question answered without a sigh, a wife who did not treat his presence like a calendar invite she had not approved. He tried one more time on a Wednesday evening after work. Emily was sitting on the edge of their bed, still in her office clothes, scrolling through messages. Nathan stood in the doorway and said, "Could we put our phones away for 20 minutes tonight?" She did not look up. For what? The question was simple, but the tone made it cruel. For what? As if connection needed a business case. For us, Nathan said. Emily set the phone down slowly, then rubbed her forehead. Nathan, I do not have the bandwidth for another relationship meeting. I am your husband, and I am exhausted. I know. That is why I keep trying to find a time that works for you. She laughed then, not loudly, but enough to make him feel like he had stepped into the wrong room. Do you hear yourself? You are trying to schedule intimacy like a maintenance appointment. That phrase returned from Vanessa's call, polished and sharpened. Nathan felt the memory of standing in the hallway with warm towels in his arms. Is that what you told Vanessa? Emily's eyes lifted. For the first time all evening, she looked fully present, but not because she cared that he was hurt, because she realized he had heard. Were you listening to my private conversation? She asked. I heard my name. That is not the same thing as being invited into the conversation. Nathan nodded slowly. You are right. I was not invited into the conversation about me. She stood, arms crossed. This is exactly the problem. You take everything personally. It was personal. No, Nathan. It was me venting. Adults vent. Adults also apologize when they turn their spouse into a punchline. Emily's expression hardened. I am not apologizing for needing a place to say how I feel. And how do you feel? He asked. She looked away. Crowded. The word came quietly, but it filled the room. Nathan glanced behind him at the hallway, the wedding photo on the wall, the laundry basket near the bathroom, the ordinary evidence of a shared life that suddenly seemed to belong more to him than to her. I have been trying to reach you, he said. That is not crowding you. Emily picked up her phone again, as if the rectangle in her hand could give her back control. It feels like chasing. There it was, said without anger this time, almost with boredom. Nathan could have argued. He could have explained that chasing was not what a husband did when he asked his wife to care whether the marriage still had a pulse. Instead, he stepped aside and let her walk past him into the hallway. She did not touch his arm. She did not pause. She moved through the house like someone leaving a room she had already emotionally sold. That night, Nathan slept on the far edge of the bed and listened to Emily breathing beside him, steady and untroubled. The distance between them was only a few inches, but it felt like the width of Wisconsin in winter, flat, frozen, and impossible to cross without losing feeling in your hands. By morning, he understood that Emily was not asking for rest. She was building a system where he was always wrong for needing her, and she was always right for withholding herself. And once a husband becomes a burden in the story his wife tells herself, every act of love starts looking like a debt she resents paying. Nathan let the words chasing and crowded sit between them for 3 more days, not because he accepted them, but because he wanted to understand what they had done to him. By Friday night, the answer was clear. They had taught him to hesitate before loving his own wife. They had made him stand outside the simplest parts of marriage like a man waiting to be invited into a house he helped pay for. Emily came home late again that evening, a little after 10, carrying a paper shopping bag from a downtown boutique and smelling faintly of restaurant wine and cold air. Nathan was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after making dinner for one. The other plate he would have made without thinking sat and used in the cabinet. Emily noticed that before she noticed him. You ate already? She asked. Yes. She dropped her bag on a chair. I did not know you were cooking. You did not say when you would be home. Her eyes narrowed, not with hurt yet, but with the irritation of someone seeing a convenience removed without permission. I had a work thing. I figured. That calm answer seemed to bother her more than questions would have. She poured herself water, took one sip, then leaned against the counter. You have been weird all week. Nathan folded the dish towel and placed it beside the sink. I have been quiet. Exactly. He looked at her then. Really looked. Past the office makeup, the confident posture, the phone still glowing in her hand. You said I was chasing you. Emily sighed. Nathan, I was frustrated. You also said I crowd you. Because sometimes you do. He nodded slowly. Not agreement. Recognition. Then I need to ask you clearly. Do you want a marriage where we both show up? Or do you want me to wait until you decide I am allowed to matter? Emily's face hardened in the same way it had the night before, as if seriousness itself offended her. That is manipulative. The word almost made him laugh, but the sound never came. Asking where I stand in my own marriage is manipulative? You are doing it again. You are making me responsible for your emotional state. Nathan felt something inside him settle, not break, not flare, simply settle into place. You are my wife. I am allowed to be affected by you. Emily shook her head. No, you are allowed to have feelings. You are not allowed to make them my assignment. There it was, the final version of the philosophy she had been building with Vanessa's words and her own resentment. Marriage without obligation. Closeness without availability. A husband permitted to exist, but not to need. Nathan looked down at the ring on his hand, the same ring he had worn through job losses, hospital visits, late bills, moves, interviews, and every night Emily had once needed to be reminded she was not alone. I cannot save this by myself, he said. Emily pushed away from the counter. Nobody asked you to save anything. I did. His voice stayed quiet. I asked. Over and over. No, you chased. She said it sharper this time, like a verdict. You chased conversations, chased reassurance, chased time, chased me until I could not breathe. So yes, from now on, I decide when we talk. I decide when we spend time together. I decide when I have the energy to deal with us. You need to stop chasing me. The kitchen went still. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pull back. Nathan saw the entire marriage in that silence. The pharmacy parking lot, the cold coffee, the debt spreadsheets, the interview hallway, the blue bedroom walls, the tea cooling in the living room, the towels folded outside a door where his wife had laughed at him. He had thought love meant continuing to step forward. But love that requires one person to beg for basic presence is not devotion. It is erosion. Emily crossed her arms, waiting for the familiar pattern. He would explain. She would resist. He would soften. She would win the right to leave the conversation while still calling it a boundary. Nathan did not give her the pattern. Okay, he said. Emily blinked. Okay, what? I will stop chasing. Good. She said too quickly, but there was uncertainty behind it now. That is all I have been asking for. Nathan nodded. Then I will do it fully. He walked past her, not dramatically, not coldly, just steadily. In the living room, he picked up the blanket from the sofa, folded it, and placed it over the armrest. He turned off the lamp she used to leave on when she wanted him to wait up. Then he went into the small office, opened the lower drawer, and took out the household folder. Mortgage, insurance, joint accounts, car payments, credit cards, the quiet architecture of a life he had kept stable while she called his need for connection a burden. He started a new document and typed the word timeline. Emily stood in the kitchen doorway watching him. What are you doing? Nathan did not look up. Stopping. She gave a nervous laugh. That is not what I meant. He finally turned toward her. I know. You meant stop reaching for you. But keep standing close enough for whenever you want to reach back. Emily did not answer. Nathan looked back at the blank page, his hands steady on the keyboard. I cannot do that anymore. The next morning, Nathan did exactly what Emily had asked for, and that was what made it different from every other silence between them. He did not send the usual 8 o'clock message asking if she had made it to the office safely. He did not remind her about the forecast, even though the local news said freezing rain might move into Madison by late afternoon. He did not ask whether she wanted him to pick up dry cleaning, did not text a picture of the maple tree shedding yellow leaves across the backyard, did not send the small joke he would normally send to soften the start of her day. He went to work, answered emails, ate lunch at his desk, and left his phone face down beside the keyboard. By noon, Emily had not messaged either. That did not surprise him. What surprised him was how much effort it took not to reach for her anyway. Habit is a leash people mistake for love until the day they try to stand still. At 5:30, Nathan stopped at the grocery store and bought only what he needed for himself. Turkey, bread, coffee, a bag of apples, and the brand of soup Emily disliked because it had too much pepper. It felt petty for half a second, then it felt honest. He was no longer planning meals around a woman who treated dinner with him like a negotiation. At home, he made a sandwich, cleaned the plate, and turned off the kitchen light before 7. When Emily came in at 8:40, she paused in the doorway, expecting the smell of dinner, the lamp in the living room, the sound of him asking how her day went. Instead, the house was quiet. Nathan was in the small office with the household folder open, entering numbers into a spreadsheet. Mortgage, utilities, car insurance, joint credit card, subscriptions he paid for without thinking, medical premiums, the quiet machinery of a marriage that had kept running because he kept oiling every gear. Emily appeared in the office doorway, still wearing her coat. "Did you eat?" she asked. "Yes." "You did not ask if I wanted anything." Nathan looked up. "You said you wanted space." Her mouth tightened. "Space does not mean act like I do not live here. I am not acting like that." He turned back to the spreadsheet. "I am adjusting to what you asked for." She stood there for another moment, waiting for him to add something, but he did not. The old Nathan would have softened the room, offered soup, asked if work was hard, apologized for sounding distant even when she was the one who had created distance. The new Nathan was not cruel. He was simply not volunteering for rejection. After she went upstairs, he opened a new tab and searched for family law consultations in Dane County. He found Laura Whitman's name through a referral page Caleb Turner had once sent him after his own separation. Nathan had ignored it then because he thought needing a lawyer meant the marriage had already failed. Now he understood that asking questions was not failure. It was protection. He scheduled a consultation for Friday and wrote a short note. Considering legal separation, need guidance on shared finances and communication boundaries. His hands did not shake when he pressed send. That unsettled him more than if they had. Over the next few days, Nathan continued stopping. He did not sleep in the bedroom after Emily came in past midnight and turned on the light as if he were furniture. He moved a pillow and blanket to the living room couch, then later to the guest room when he realized temporary discomfort was becoming a decision. He stopped reminding her about her mother's birthday. He stopped covering for her when his sister called to ask why Emily had missed Sunday dinner again. He stopped checking the oil in her car after she ignored his message about the warning light. Not because he wanted her stranded, but because he had spent years confusing partnership with preventing every consequence from reaching her. Emily noticed, but at first she named it victory. He heard her on the phone with Vanessa, voice low in the kitchen, saying, "I think he finally gets it." I needed him to back off. Nathan stood in the hallway for 1 second, then walked away. He had backed off. Completely. And for the first time in 7 years, Emily was about to learn that being chased and being cherished had felt similar only because Nathan had been doing both. At first, Emily treated Nathan's silence like proof that her new rules had worked. For 3 days, she moved through the house with the loose confidence of someone who believed the balance had finally shifted in her favor. No questions when she came home late. No disappointed look when she canceled dinner. No careful voice from the hallway asking if they could talk for a few minutes. She told Vanessa on the phone that Nathan was finally learning boundaries, and Vanessa called it growth. Emily almost believed that. Almost. Then the quiet started to feel less like freedom and more like absence. On Tuesday morning, she opened the refrigerator and realized there were no containers labeled with her name, no leftover soup portioned the way Nathan always did when she worked late. On Wednesday, she left for work without her presentation drive because Nathan no longer checked the entry table after her, and she had to turn around halfway to the office. On Thursday, freezing rain came down over Madison, slicking the sidewalks and glazing the windshield of her car. For years, Nathan would have scraped it before she left, not because she was helpless, but because he noticed things before they became problems. That morning, she stood in heels beside her car, chipping ice with an old loyalty card, feeling ridiculous and angry, though she could not quite decide at whom. When she walked back inside to find gloves, Nathan was at the kitchen counter pouring coffee into a travel mug. "The roads are bad," she said, waiting for the familiar concern to rise in him. He nodded. "Drive carefully." 2 words. Polite. Empty of the old reach. Emily stared at him. "That is it." Nathan looked up. "What else do you need?" The question sounded practical, but it exposed something she was not ready to name. She did not need him to scrape the car. She needed to know he still wanted to. "Nothing," she said, and left with wet cuffs and a strange tightness in her throat. That night, she came home late on purpose, partly to test him, partly because she did not know how to enter a house where no one was waiting. The living room was dark. The lamp beside the sofa was off. The blanket he used in the guest room was folded neatly over one armchair, and the couch was empty. She found Nathan in the office, reviewing documents with a calm focus that made her feel like a visitor interrupting business hours. "Long day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes." He did not ask about hers. Emily set her purse down. "We landed the Northside account." "Congratulations," Nathan said. He meant it. That was the problem. His voice was kind, but it did not move toward her. There was no follow-up, no smile that invited her to sit, no warm attention wrapping around the news until it felt bigger. She had once called that attention too much. Now its absence made the room feel cold. "You used to care more," she said before she could stop herself. Nathan closed the folder slowly. "I still care. I am just not chasing the conversation." The exact phrase struck her like a door clicking shut. Emily looked away, embarrassed by how quickly she wanted to take it back. Over the next week, the emptiness became harder to dress up as victory. Nathan responded to texts hours later, always polite, always complete, never warm enough to lean on. He stopped sending good morning messages. He stopped asking about work dinners. He stopped pausing movies when she walked through the room, stopped leaving her favorite mug by the coffee maker, stopped sleeping where she could turn toward him and assume he would still be there. Every change was small enough to be defensible and large enough to be felt. Emily tried to create a reaction. She mentioned Vanessa's invitations. She talked about another late event. She complained that he had become distant. Nathan only said, "I am giving you the space you asked for." The sentence followed her around the house. It was not cruel. It was worse. It was accurate. One evening, she sat alone at the kitchen table with takeout she had ordered for herself, listening to Nathan move quietly in the guest room. For the first time, she understood that space was not always a gift. Sometimes space was what remained after someone stopped filling the distance you created. The envelope appeared on the kitchen table the following Friday, plain white, neatly centered where the cold mugs had sat the night Emily told Nathan to stop chasing her. She noticed it the moment she came home because the house had become too quiet for anything new to hide. Nathan was sitting across from it with his hands folded, wearing a dark sweater, his expression calm in a way that no longer looked like waiting. Outside, Madison was under a thin sheet of early winter rain, streetlights blurring against the wet windows, the old maple tree standing bare in the backyard. Emily set her laptop bag on the chair and looked at the envelope. "What is this?" Nathan did not make her guess. "I met with Laura Whitman this morning." The name meant nothing to her at first. Then she saw the return address printed in the corner and understood enough for her face to change. "A lawyer?" "A legal consultant," Nathan said, "for separation options, financial boundaries, and communication agreements." Emily stared at him, then let out a small laugh that did not reach her eyes. "You cannot be serious." Nathan slid the envelope toward her. "I am." She did not touch it. "So because I asked for space, you are going nuclear?" He looked at her steadily. "No. Because you asked me to stop chasing, and I realized I needed to understand what stopping meant if the marriage stayed one-sided." Emily's jaw tightened. "That is not what I meant." "I know." His voice stayed quiet. "You meant I should stop asking for connection, but keep paying, waiting, adjusting, covering, remembering, and being available whenever you decided I was useful again." The words landed harder than he intended, but he did not take them back. Emily reached for the envelope and pulled out the papers. Her eyes moved over the headings. Consultation summary, recommended temporary financial boundaries, written communication for major household decisions, review of shared expenses, separate responsibility for personal discretionary spending. It was not a divorce filing. Not yet. That almost made it worse because it meant Nathan had not exploded. He had thought. He had measured. He had taken the emotional chaos she dismissed and translated it into order. "You are treating me like an enemy," she said. Nathan shook his head. "No, I am treating myself like someone who needs protection." Emily looked toward the dark living room. No lamp waiting. No tea. No dinner. No question about her day. The absence she had been pretending to enjoy now stood around her like furniture rearranged in the dark. "I only wanted room to breathe," she said. "No," Nathan replied. "You wanted control over when I was allowed to matter." Her eyes flashed. "That is unfair." "Maybe," he said, But here is what is true. I stopped texting first. You did not ask why. I stopped waiting up. You called it boundaries. I stopped making dinner for two. You got annoyed because it inconvenienced you. I stopped reminding you of things, covering for you, anticipating what you needed, and suddenly the space you asked for started feeling like neglect. Emily gripped the papers. You are twisting everything. Nathan leaned back, tired but steady. I am naming the pattern. She read the next page and saw the timeline. Dates. Missed dinners. Ignored texts. Canceled plans. The video call with Vanessa. The night she said he would decide nothing about when they talked or spent time together. Nathan had not written it like an accusation. That made it harder to dismiss. It looked clinical, almost boring, but every line carried a piece of the marriage she had been telling herself was too dramatic to discuss. You wrote all this down? She whispered. I had to. Every time I tried to talk, you said I was chasing. So I stopped talking and started keeping track. Emily finally sat down. The chair scraped softly against the floor, a sound that once would have made Nathan ask if she was okay. He did not ask. That silence frightened her more than the envelope. Are you leaving me? Nathan looked down at his wedding ring, then back at her. I am leaving the position you put me in. Her voice lowered. What position? Outside the door, waiting for you to decide when I get to be your husband. The sentence filled the kitchen. Emily had no clever language for it, no borrowed phrase from Vanessa, no polished boundary to hide behind. For the first time, she saw that Nathan had not become cold. He had become unavailable to the old arrangement. He stood and picked up his keys from the counter. We can talk through the terms after you read them. In writing first. Emily looked up quickly. You are leaving now? For the night. Caleb has a spare room. The name made the moment real. Not a threat. Not a performance. A plan. Nathan paused at the doorway, glancing once at the two empty spaces on the kitchen table where the cold mugs had been. You asked me to stop chasing, he said. I did. I just kept walking. Then he stepped out into the rain, leaving the envelope open on the table and Emily sitting in the space she had demanded, finally understanding that space can become loss when the person filling it learns how to leave. The next morning, Nathan woke in Caleb Turner's spare room to the sound of rain tapping against a window that was not his. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. Then he saw his folded jacket on the chair, his phone on the nightstand, and the small overnight bag he had packed without drama the night before. The truth settled over him quietly. He had not abandoned his marriage. He had stepped out of the waiting room Emily had built for him. Caleb made coffee in the kitchen without asking too many questions, which Nathan appreciated more than any speech. You okay? Caleb asked. Nathan looked down at the mug in his hands. I think I am done proving I deserve a place in my own life. Caleb nodded like a man who understood that some sentences take years to become simple. By noon, Emily had sent 3 messages. The first said, we need to talk. The second said, I did not mean for you to leave. The third said, this is cruel. Nathan read them in order, then opened a new message and replied with the calmness Laura Whitman had recommended. I am willing to discuss household matters and next steps in writing first. I am not available for another conversation where my need for basic respect is called chasing. He stared at the message before sending it, not because he doubted it, but because it sounded like someone he had been trying to become for a long time. 2 days later, they met in Laura's office, a quiet place above a small law firm in downtown Madison, with gray walls, a polished table, and a window looking over wet streets and bare trees. Emily sat across from Nathan, wearing the same composed expression she used at work, but her hands kept moving in her lap. Laura placed the timeline on the table without judgment. Missed dinners. Canceled plans. Ignored messages. The video call with Vanessa. The night Emily said she would decide when they could talk or spend time together. Shared expenses Nathan had carried. Emotional labor he had performed so consistently, it had become invisible. Emily looked at the pages as if they belonged to another woman. This makes me look terrible, she whispered. Nathan answered before Laura could. It makes the pattern visible. Emily's eyes filled. I was overwhelmed. I needed space. Nathan nodded, and for a moment the old tenderness moved in him, the instinct to rescue her from the consequence of her own words. But he let the feeling pass without obeying it. I would have given you space, he said. What I could not keep giving you is access to my loyalty while you treated my presence like a burden. Laura quietly outlined the next steps. separate responsibility for personal expenses, written communication for major decisions, a temporary living arrangement, and time to decide whether separation would become permanent. Nothing about it sounded dramatic. That was what made it final. Emily had expected anger she could argue with, neediness she could dismiss, maybe even sadness she could comfort on her own schedule. She had not expected order. When the meeting ended, she followed Nathan into the hallway. "Do you still love me?" she asked. Nathan stopped near the elevator. For 7 years, that question would have pulled him back toward her like gravity. He thought of the snowstorm, the jumper cables, the cold mugs, the soup portions, the porch light, the years of choosing her even when choosing her cost him pieces of himself. "I did not stop loving you when I went quiet," he said. "I stopped begging to be loved back." Emily covered her mouth, and the truth finally reached her without Vanessa's language around it. Nathan had not become cold overnight. He had become tired of standing outside a door that only opened when Emily wanted comfort, help, or convenience. He stepped into the elevator alone. As the doors closed, he saw her still standing in the hallway, surrounded by the silence she once demanded. Nathan did not feel victorious. He felt hollow, but clean. Sometimes the person who tells you to stop chasing is not prepared for what happens when you finally learn how to walk away. What do you think hurt Emily more, Nathan leaving, or realizing he had been trying to save the marriage while she kept calling it pressure? Share your thoughts, because stories like this remind us that love cannot survive where one person controls the door and the other is forced to wait outside. If you believe quiet strength, dignity, and hard truth deserve to be heard, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next story.